All right, I'm going to do a brief overview of criminal law. Again, this is not a major issue for businesses, albeit understand that businesses can be prosecuted, corporations can be prosecuted by the government for crimes. And remember that the issue in a criminal case is whether the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt and whether the government can prove every element of the crime as set forth in the statute beyond a reasonable doubt. So there are a number of constitutional safeguards for people accused of crimes that also apply to corporations, which are considered persons under the law. These include the right to remain silent, the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, things like that. Those are all germane to businesses, and you should recognize that a business does have those rights, and certainly individuals do as well. When we talked about tort law, we talked about intentional torts, and that with an intentional tort, there has to be the mental level of intent to do the act which constitutes whatever the tort is, like trespass. I intentionally went onto your property, I knew it was yours, and I knew you didn't want me on there, but I went on there. That's the intentional tort of trespass. Likewise, crimes which are defined by statute have a mental element called a mens rea and an act that's involved, an actus rea. So there are two elements to every crime. Now the mental element can vary depending on, reckless driving, recklessness, murder, premeditated murder. You have to prove premeditation, you have to prove uses of a deadly weapon, somebody was killed, etc. These are all set forth in the statutes. What's interesting about torts and crimes, as I said, for every tort there's a crime, right? For every crime there's a tort. And as I said before, can a person be prosecuted for a crime and sued in tort for the same act? Yes, you can. Think O.J. Simpson, right? Prosecuted for murder, then sued for wrongful death. He beat the rap on the murder charge, but lost in the civil wrongful death tort case, right? So it's kind of interesting. A lot of people don't understand why that happens, and it really boils down to the fact there are different burdens of proof. Again, in a civil case, you've got preponderance of the evidence, easier burden to prove, more likely than not is how it's also phrased. If you can prove by over 51% that the person is liable, you will prevail in your civil case. In criminal, on the other hand, the issue is guilt. The government, and again, it's only the government that prosecutes. A lot of people incorrectly use the term, I'm going to prosecute you for trespass or something like that. No, that's not how it works. Individuals, private parties don't prosecute each other. You sue somebody, right? So with in a criminal case, it's the government prosecuting you. They have to prove each element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And you have a boatload of constitutional and procedural protections that are afforded to people that are accused of crimes. There are various categories of crimes. These vary by state. In the state of Washington, we have things like misdemeanors, which you can get up to 90 days in jail or I think $1,000 fine. Gross misdemeanors, it's up to a year in jail. Then you get into the felony world, which you're talking multiple years in jail, etc. So general word of advice is that it would be having a criminal conviction is like being a leper in society. You have a tremendous number of problems getting an apartment, getting a job, etc. So if you know someone that is in that world, it would be far better to try to get that reduced off your record somehow. There are ways to get crimes off your record called expungement for most crimes. Obviously, just like with torts, we talked about some defenses in tort cases, and remember we talked about the idea of comparative negligence. And, assumption of the risk is another one that you see in tort cases. Similar in criminal cases, there are a number of defenses that the defendant can assert, depending on the case. Obviously, self-defense is a big one, defense of others. You've heard of insanity. That's not very useful defense, but there are a number of defenses that depend on the nature of the crime that you're being prosecuted for.